is something I'm not doing right. That thought has been following you. This video is about what Nietzsche discovered when he followed it too. There is something you are not doing right. That thought has been following you for months now, maybe longer, and the worst part is not that it arrived. It is that it will not leave, no matter what you try. So you change the strategy. You study what the people ahead of you are doing. You implement it carefully. You work harder than before, more deliberately than before, with more awareness than before, and the results still do not come. Not the way they came for others, not at the pace you need them to, not in a way that feels like evidence that you are moving in the right direction. And the thought gets louder. There must be something I'm not doing right. You look at the people who started after you and passed you. You look at the ones who seem to be doing the same thing with less effort and more reward. You look at the gap between where you are and where you believed you would be by now, and something in you quietly begins to wonder if the gap is evidence of something more fundamental than a wrong strategy. Maybe it is not the strategy. Maybe it is you. That thought, right there, is the most dangerous place you can arrive. And Nietzsche knew exactly why. Not because the thought is wrong to have, but because of what most people do with it next. And what they do with it next is what keeps them stuck for years. Before I show you what Nietzsche discovered, I want to give you 3 things you can use today. Not theory yet, not philosophy. Just 3 practices for the specific exhaustion of trying harder and seeing less than you expected. The first practice, the evidence audit. Tonight, take 1 page and write down every real thing you have built in the last 6 months. Not the results you wanted, the actual things that exist now that did not exist before. The skills developed, the knowledge accumulated, the work completed, the attempts made, the understanding earned through failure that cannot be purchased any other way. Write all of it down without judgment, without comparing it to what you expected, without measuring it against what someone else has built in the same time. Just the actual evidence of what has happened. Then read it. Because Nietzsche said one of the most dangerous habits of the ambitious mind is its tendency to measure progress only against the destination, never against the starting point. And when you only measure against the destination, the distance ahead always looks larger than the distance behind. The evidence audit reverses that. It shows you what is actually there. The second practice, the process separation. For the next 7 days, separate every action you take into 2 categories. The first category, things you are doing because they serve the work itself. The second category, things you are doing because you are hoping they will produce a visible result quickly enough to quiet the doubt. Most people discover, when they do this honestly, that a significant portion of their effort falls into the second category. Not because they are lazy. Because the anxiety of not seeing results fast enough causes them to keep changing the approach, keep adding new strategies, keep searching for the thing they are missing, when what they are missing is the patience to let the current approach compound. Nietzsche called this the exhaustion of the reactive will, the will that responds to doubt by doing more rather than by trusting more. Separating your actions into these 2 categories will show you where your energy is actually going. The third practice, the comparison fast. For 7 days, stop measuring your progress against anyone else's. Not permanently, just 7 days. Not because comparison is always destructive, but because right now, in this specific season, it is functioning as evidence rather than motivation. You are using other people's results as proof of your inadequacy, rather than as information about what is possible. Those are completely different uses of the same observation. For 7 days, the only valid measure of your progress is your progress against your own previous position, not against the person who started after you and seems further ahead. not against the channel that grew faster, the business that scaled quicker, the life that came together more visibly. Just you against the version of you that existed 6 months ago. That comparison is the only one that is actually about you. Try all three this week, because what Nietzsche discovered about why the effort is not producing the results is going to permanently change the way you understand your own timing. Because Nietzsche did not just describe the feeling of getting nowhere despite doing everything right. He traced it to its source, and what he found there was not a strategy problem. It was not a talent problem. It was something he called the most subtle and the most devastating form of self-sabotage available to an ambitious human being. And once you see it, you will recognize it in everything you have been doing. Nietzsche believed that the human will operate in two completely different modes. He called the first mode the active will. The active will creates from the inside out. It sets a direction, commits to it, and measures itself against its own standard rather than against the progress of others. It is powered by what Nietzsche called the will to power. Not power over others, but the drive to become more fully what you are capable of becoming. The active will is patient in a specific way. Not passive, not resigned, not comfortable with stagnation, but patient in the sense that it trusts the process enough to let it work without constantly interrupting it to check whether it is working. He called the second mode the reactive will. The reactive will creates from the outside in. It does not measure itself against its own standard. It measures itself against others. It is powered not by the drive to become something, but by the fear of being left behind, of being proved inadequate, of arriving too late. And here is the critical thing Nietzsche observed about the reactive will. It looks exactly like ambition from the outside. The person driven by the reactive will works hard. They study. They implement. They change strategies when something is not working. They research what successful people do, and they do those things. From the outside, it looks like drive. From the inside, it feels like drowning. Because the reactive will can never be satisfied by progress. Every result it achieves is immediately measured against someone else's result and found insufficient. Every strategy that works becomes the strategy that should have worked sooner. Every step forward is immediately followed by the awareness of how many steps remain. The reactive will is not trying to build something, it is trying to prove something. And the difference between those two motivations is the entire difference between a life that compounds and a life that exhausts itself. Now think about your own situation honestly. When you work on what you are building, when you put in the effort, implement the strategy, create the content, do the work, what is the feeling underneath the action? Is it the feeling of someone building something they believe in? Or is it the feeling of someone trying to close a gap? Because Nietzsche said those two feelings produce identical behavior in the short term. Both people work hard. Both people implement strategies. Both people study what is working and try to apply it. But over time, the person building from belief compounds, and the person building to close a gap exhausts themselves, because the gap never closes fast enough, because there is always someone further ahead, because the reactive will has no natural resting point. It can only rest when it has beaten something, and there is always something new to beat. You are not behind. You are building. Those are not the same thing. But Nietzsche went further. He said the reactive will has a specific weapon it uses against the people who carry it. He called it ressentiment. And it is the reason that so many genuinely capable people never become what they were capable of becoming. Ressentiment. Not resentment in the ordinary sense. Something more specific and more subtle. Ressentiment is what happens when the reactive will has been running long enough that the pain of comparison begins to rewrite the story of why you are where you are. It starts as motivation. You see someone ahead of you and you think, I want that. I will work for that. Seeing them ahead of me makes me want to move faster. That is healthy. That is the appropriate use of comparison. But when the gap persists, when you work and the gap does not close at the pace you need, something shifts. The comparison stops being motivating and starts being evidence. Evidence that the game is rigged. Evidence that the people ahead of you had advantages you do not have. Evidence that the effort is not worth it. Evidence that you should perhaps stop. And Nietzsche said this shift, from comparison as motivation to comparison as evidence, is the exact moment that the reactive will begin to destroy the person who carries it. Because ressentiment does not just make you feel bad, it makes you feel justified in feeling bad. And a person who feels justified in their stagnation will find an infinite number of reasons to remain stagnant. Ressentiment does not just make you feel stuck. It makes you feel right about being stuck. Here is the part that is difficult to hear. The strategy is probably not the problem. I know that is not what the reactive will wants to hear, because the reactive will is very comfortable with the idea that there is a strategy you have not found yet. A missing piece, a better approach, a secret that the successful ones know that you do not. Because as long as the problem is the strategy, the solution is more searching, and more searching feels like progress, even when it is not. Nietzsche watched this pattern in the people around him and described it with devastating precision. He said the person who keeps changing their approach is not looking for a better strategy. They are looking for relief from the doubt. The strategy change is not a tactical decision. It is an attempt to quiet the voice that says, "There is something I am not doing right." And every new strategy that does not produce immediate visible results makes the voice louder. So the next strategy change comes sooner, and the one after that sooner still, until the person is changing direction so frequently that nothing has time to compound. And then they look at the results and say, "I have been working so hard and nothing is happening." And they are right. Nothing is happening, because nothing was given enough time to happen. The strategy is not the problem. The impatience is. But here is the deeper truth underneath that. The impatience is not a character flaw. The impatience is a symptom. It is the symptom of a will that is measuring itself against the wrong standard. When you measure your progress against someone else's visible results, the only pace that feels fast enough is their pace. And their pace is not your pace. Their pace reflects their specific circumstances, their specific timing, their specific compounding of previous work you did not see. You are comparing your internal reality, the doubt, the effort, the uncertainty, the slow, invisible accumulation of capability, against their external appearance. And external appearances of success are always more compressed, more dramatic, more sudden-looking than the actual process that produced them. Every channel that appears to have grown quickly had a long period of invisible work before the growth became visible. Every business that appears to have succeeded overnight had years of compounding before the overnight happened. The overnight is real. The overnight is also always preceded by a long period that looked exactly like what you are experiencing right now. Nietzsche's answer to ressentiment was not positive thinking. It was not gratitude practice. It was not the instruction to stop comparing yourself to others and love your journey. He would have found all of that insufficient. His answer was the will to power, redirected. Specifically, he said the cure for the reactive will is not to eliminate the drive. The drive is not the problem. The direction of the drive is the problem. The reactive will point the drive outward, toward closing a gap, toward beating a competitor, toward achieving a result that will silence the doubt. The active will point the drive inward, toward becoming more capable, more skilled, more genuinely excellent at the thing you are building. And the shift from one to the other is not a motivational exercise. It is a practical one. Stop trying to close the gap. Start trying to deepen the work. Here is what that shift looks like in practice. The reactive will asks, "Why are they ahead of me and what do I need to do to catch up?" The active will asks, "What is the next genuine improvement I can make to what I am building, regardless of what anyone else is doing?" The reactive will measure success by position, Am I ahead of where I was relative to others? The active will measures success by depth. Is what I am building more genuinely excellent than it was before? The reactive will is exhausted by effort that does not produce visible results quickly. The active will is energized by effort that produces genuine improvement, regardless of when the visible results arrive. And here is the crucial thing Nietzsche observed. The person operating from the active will almost always produces better work. Not because they care less about results, because they are building from a place of genuine engagement with the work itself, rather than from a place of anxiety about the gap. And better work, sustained over time, produces better results. Not always faster, but almost always more substantially. The results come, but only after you stop making them the point. 6. Amor Fati. Nietzsche had a name for the final shift, the one that happens when the active will has been practiced long enough that something fundamental changes in your relationship to your own timeline. He called it Amor Fati, love of fate. Not acceptance of fate, not resignation to fate, not making peace with circumstances you cannot change. Love. The specific choice to look at exactly where you are. The timeline you are on, the pace at which things are moving, the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And say, without performance, without pretending it does not hurt, this is exactly where I am supposed to be. Not because everything happens for a reason in the comfortable sense, but because this specific difficulty, this specific timing, this specific experience of working hard and not yet seeing the results, this is producing something in you that the faster timeline could not have produced. The slow timeline is not punishment. It is preparation. The people who grew fast often broke fast. Not always, but often enough that Nietzsche noticed it. The person who builds slowly, who compounds quietly, who is forced by their circumstances to become more genuinely excellent because visible results are not available as a substitute for genuine excellence. That person, when the results finally arrive, has built something that can hold the weight of the results. The fast growth breaks the person who is not yet ready to hold it. The slow growth prepares the person for exactly what they are building toward. This is not comfort. This is a different way of understanding what your current timeline is actually doing to you. It is not evidence that you are behind. It is evidence that you are being built. 7. The eternal recurrence. Nietzsche had one final question he used as a test for whether a person was living from the active will or the reactive will. He called it the eternal recurrence. He asked, if you had to live this exact life, this exact timeline, this exact experience of working hard and not yet seeing the results you expected, over and over, forever, would you choose it? Most people, when they first encounter this question, feel resistance. No, they would not choose it. They would choose the faster timeline, the more visible results, the clearer evidence that the effort is working. But Nietzsche said that resistance is the reactive will speaking. The active will answers the question differently. The active will says, yes, because this specific difficulty is producing something I could not have produced without it. Because the person I am becoming through this specific experience is the person I need to be for what I am building toward. Because I would not trade this timeline for someone else's. Not because it is easy, but because it is mine. That answer, reached honestly, not performed, is the shift from ressentiment to Amor Fati, from the reactive will to the active will, from building to prove something to building to become something.
Now you know what Nietzsche would say to that thought. Not that it is wrong, not that you should dismiss it or reframe it with gratitude or replace it with positive affirmations. He would say, you are right that something is not right. But the thing that is not right is not the strategy. The thing that is not right is the standard you are measuring yourself against. You have been measuring yourself against people who are not you, on timelines that are not yours, building things that are not what you are building. And by that measure, you will always be behind. Because that measure was never designed to show you what is actually happening in your own work. The strategy is not the problem. The impatience is not even the real problem. The real problem is a will that has been pointed outward for so long that it has forgotten what it feels like to be pointed inward, toward the work itself, toward the genuine improvement that is available today regardless of what anyone else is doing, toward the version of what you are building that is more excellent than yesterday's version. That is the only race Nietzsche believed was worth running, not the one against the person ahead of you, the one against the lesser version of yourself. You are not behind. You are building, and the building is the point. Drop one word in the comments, the one word that describes what you are building right now. Not how far along you are, not whether it is working yet, just what you are building. Because naming it is the first act of the active will. And you are not alone in the slow season. I read every one.